Hello friends, today we will analyze the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, its features as well as its criticism. So let's analyze this. If you want to download this slide, you can click on the link in the description below. If you want to listen to this video in Hindi also, then you can go to our another channel, that is prepezee. The link is also given in the description box. So basically the context is that the DPDP bill has been introduced in the parliament and it seeks to regulate the processing of personal data of individuals of the country. So let us first understand what do we mean by a personal data. See, personal data is something which can identify any individual. For example, you can identify me by my name. You can also, if my date of birth, my address, all such details are available, then it is very easy to point me out from a list of a given persons. So any data which relates to you or identifies to you, that is called a personal data. And the individual about whom we are talking in relation to that data is called as the data principal. So data principal is basically that individual about whose data we are talking. The data which is identifying to that person is called data principal. Data fiduciary, on the other hand, is the business, the company, the app or the website on which this data is being stored, that is, which is processing our data. Now you might ask that what is the meaning of this processing? So see, processing is a term which includes all operations, including collection of data. Like if any website is collecting my data, like my name, my details, my financial details, my health history, even when I am purchasing anything on Amazon and it is keeping a record of that data, that is also called as collection of data. Then the storage of that data, use of that data. For example, see, what do we mean by use of the data? See, let's say I am purchasing something on Amazon. So whenever I am writing anything in the search query, Amazon now comes to know that this is what I require for my usage. And therefore now Amazon, for example, I might write treadmill on the search query. So tomorrow when I log again into Amazon, the Amazon will show me a list of treadmills which are having some kind of offers. So this is the use of data. Then sharing of this data, that is sharing to other any other organization, any individual. Dissemination of any kind of data, that is you just give it to some other entities. And finally the erasure or of removal of this data. All of this, it comes under the processing of data. So these are some definitions which you should know. Now, why do we need this bill? What is the need of bill? What are the reasons why we needed to introduce this bill? See, first of all, it has the potential. Any processing of the personal data of any individual has the potential on the implication on the right to privacy of that individual. That is, if a personal data is available, if any kind of personal data is available with any portal, any website, any organization, they can potentially infringe on my right to privacy, and which should not be allowed in a democracy. That is why it is required that this data manipulation should be checked. For example, see, let's say I store my credit card details on the website of Amazon or Flipkart or Make My Trip or whatever. So in the case of any hacker gaining access to my credit card details, won't I suffer any financial loss? The hacker might use my financial details to log in and pay for something which I do not want. And you might say that, okay, it is protected by OTP. Yes, it is. But then again, hackers, they can, they have the provisions to circumvent the OTP. But even on the international websites, there is no requirement for OTP also. There are many such websites. So if you log into the international websites, you will see that just as you enter the credit card data, they won't even ask for an OTP. OTP is valid for majorly for Indian and some other websites which follow the Indian provisions. So that is why financial details protecting. Then again, see, racial profiling or ethical profiling, ethnic profiling, these things do not happen. That is why we also require principles for data protection or provisions for data protection. What do you mean by racial profiling? See, let's say I am going to Amazon and I am searching for some kind of religious book. Now on the basis of that, the Amazon can determine that this is my religion. My religion is this. So in that case, then they can make a profile about me which will be having my racial characteristics which I do not want anyone to know. Similarly, I go to a doctor and he logs into the on any kind of portal which is having my diagnostic reports. Now, these are having the details of any kind of disease which I am suffering from. Now, these details, if leaked, then they may lead to a loss of reputation for me, and the data and the example is already prevailing. See, when COVID list, the initial list came, they had the name, the phone number, the address of a particular person who was suffering from COVID. And those persons, it dealt a great mental harassment and as well as discrimination to these people who were not in a position to suffer that mental disturbance as of that time. So that is why there is a requirement to protect the privacy of any individual. And in fact, out of the 194 odd members of international community, 137 countries have already enacted a data protection law. Therefore, we are already late. In fact, right now, all these provisions, the data protection provisions, we are dealing with them in accordance with the provisions of IT Act 2000. But till when? So therefore, it was a requirement to allow a standalone law for this. And for that, firstly, in 2017, Justice B.M. Sri Krishna Committee was appointed to look into the provisions for data protection in the country. It submitted its report in July 2018. Therefore, on the basis of this report, the PDP, that is the Personal Data Protection Bill, was introduced in 2019. It was later sent to a joint parliamentary committee having members from both Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha. After that, it submitted its report in December of 2021. On the basis of this report, the bill which was introduced, the PDP bill, it was withdrawn from the parliament in 2022, and later on in November 2022, a draft was released so that the public comments could be gotten from the public, so that public consultation is there and public can tell that what are the major provisions which they need amended, which they need changed, or whatever change they should be there in this bill. Then again in August, that is this month only, this bill was finally introduced in parliament as DP, that is Digital Personal Data Protection Bill. Now, when we have understood the timeline also, now let us understand what are the major features of the bill. First of all, on what kind of data is it applicable? See, firstly, any data which is collected online or which is collected offline but then later it is digitized. So, let me explain what do I mean by this. See, online data collection, you know. For example, let me say that I go to make my trip and I fill my data. This is my name, this is my date of birth, these are my financial details and such. So this is online data collection. That is easy to understand. What is offline data being digitized? See, let's say I go to any insurance company. Now, that insurance company, I went to that company, let's say 20 years ago. At that time, it was not having any provisions for any app or online thing. So what I did was I went there. The agent, he said that, sir, please fill this physical form on the paper, and I filled the form. Later on, when this company actually made a website and it started the principles of data provisioning and data processing, then it filled my form, and its agent, its people working in that form, its employees, it filled this data on the website of the company. So in this case, now my offline data has been digitized by the company. So both of these data, whether it was already initially collected online or if it was collected offline but later digitized, they come under the provisions of this bill. Secondly, any data which is outside the country but then it pertains to the individuals of the country, which are, or any website which is offering goods or services in the country but then having the data of Indian people, that is also under the applicability of this bill. The bill is applicable to those websites also. Then there is a provision of consent on this in this bill. So what is consent? See, any data which is to be processed by any company, and by process, what do I mean? I mean collection, I mean use, I mean storage, I mean sharing, dissemination, erasure. So any data which is being processed by any company can only be done when that company has obtained the consent of the individual of the data which belongs to that individual, and the consent has been obtained from that individual. Now the provisions say that a notice should be given to that individual, that what are the details which will be taking from you and what will be the use which will be putting your data to, what is the purpose why we are collecting that data. Now we already know that there is a provision that the companies are already demanding consent from you before you proceed. See, for example, whenever you are filling a data, you are creating an account. Let's say I go to Facebook, I create name, date of birth and whatever password I will set, then I provide the details or whatever. Then in that there is a checkbox. After that there is a checkbox and it is written, I have read the terms and conditions and I accent to them. I agree to the terms of conditions. And till the time you do not checkbox this, you do not put a tick mark on this, you will not see submit button. The submit button will be grayed out. So that is what is implied by the consent. That is what is consent. When you say that yes, I read the terms and conditions and I agree, then you submit. That means you have already given your consent. This is called consent only. Now here the bill says that this consent which anyone has given, it can be withdrawn by them at any point of time, and in that case the company will be erasing all your data which it has collected. However, the bill says that this consent will not be required for certain legitimate uses. What is that use? See, first example, firstly, let's say you have voluntarily given your data. For example, you went to a website and then you wanted to create an account and then you gave that data on your own accord. You said that I want to give this data, then this consent is not required. Similarly, if government requires your data for any purpose, any use or any service, any benefit it wants to give, for that it does not require any kind of content. Even in the case of any medical emergency, for example, see, medical emergency is there and the doctor, he wants to know what is the blood group of that person because they want to do any emergency blood transfusion. They can't do it if consent is not there. So therefore, in medical emergencies, this provision is not applicable and the doctor may not need any consent from you for going forward with blood transfusion and knowing your blood group. Similarly, in case of your employment also, any details can be gained from this personal data also. So this is the meaning of consent. For the children, that is for children or the members who are 18 years of age, less than 18 years of age, or for persons with disabilities, that is Divyangjan, the legal guardian or the parent will be providing that consent. Now, let us understand that what are the rights and duties of the data principal, and who is data principal? Of whose data we are talking about? Any person whose data which identifies him, and that is what we are talking about. So let's see what are the rights. First, let's see what are the rights of data principal. See, rights of data principal is that that person can obtain information about the processing, that how you are using my data, how you are storing my data, what data you are collecting, all that information can be obtained by data principal from the company which is seeking to store that data. Secondly, that person can see to it that if there is any error in the data belonging to that person, then that error can be corrected. That error needs to be corrected, and if still there is something is persisting, then the data needs to be erased. If the person belongs or demands it, then that data needs to be erased. Next is that any person can nominate any other individual in case that person suffers from death or any physical or mental incapacity. For example, any person has died. Now, who controls the data? For that, the data principal can nominate anyone. For example, I nominate, let's say, my brother, that he will be controlling all my data after my death or any incapacity which I may lead to. So it means nomination, and that is in the event of death or incapacity. And finally, for any grievance redressal, I can go to the company. That is also my right. I can ask the company to address my grievance. But then there are certain duties also. The duties are, firstly, that I would not give any false data. Whatever data I am giving, that should be true. First is this, I would not be giving any false data. And secondly, if I am registering a complaint, that would not be a false or a frivolous complaint. That is, I would be registering only true complaints, and that is what is required. In case I am breaching these provisions, then I might be subject to a fine of up to rupees 10,000. So that is also provided in the provisions of the bill. Now, what are the obligations of the data fiduciaries, and what is fiduciary? That is the business, the app or the website which is storing your data. First of all, the first obligation of this fiduciary is that it will try to see to it that your data is accurate and as well as complete in all respects. So they will try to ensure that this data is accurate to the extent they can ensure it. So they will try to provide provisions to see to it that you are filling accurate data, and your data, whenever it is stored in complete format. They do not lose your data if they have gained access to it. Secondly, they will also ensure that adequate safeguards are there in case of any threats of any hackers are there, somebody is trying to procure or steal your data. They will see to it that adequate safeguards are there so that no one is able to steal this data. And in case this breach happens and the data is stolen, then they will inform the data principal as well as the Data Protection Board of India. And what is Data Protection Board? We will just look at it in just a minute on the next slide itself. Similarly, if the purpose for which the data was collected has now been solved, that is, the purpose is now met, then this data needs to be erased by the data fiduciary, that is the company which is storing your data. So these are the obligations of the data fiduciary. However, these obligations, like when they have to delete the data, it is not applicable to the government. Government might retain your data for infinite time if they want to, for any specific purpose, like for providing benefits or any schemes to you. Then similarly, the government has provided many exemptions to itself also and to other things also. For example, see, you have to give consent for any kind of processing of your data, then only the data can be processed. But if your data is relating to any kind of criminal or other offenses, then the government has the right to access your data without your explicit consent. So that needs to be remembered, that the government has this right of accessing your data even when you are not providing consent if any offense has been committed. Similarly, the government has the right to any kind of access or processing of data if it is in the interest of security of the country, or let's say for the maintenance of public order. So any requirement of names, date of birth or any other data, if government wants, government can access it if it is in the interest of security or the public order. Similarly, for the government's purpose, if it wants to do any research, or if it wants to use it for archival purpose, or let's say for any kind of statistics, like let's say we have been discussing this, that the government should be and it should now start accessing the data from Amazon and Flipkart so that it can determine that what are the current usages which people are purchasing, what are the items people are purchasing. On the basis of it, the government should be updating the consumer price index, the basket of goods and services which is included in that. So for these purposes, the bill provides access and exemption to the government that it can access the data. Now, next important provision is Data Protection Board of India. What is that? See, Data Protection Board will be constituted so that it can see to it that the provisions of this bill, they are met. So what are the functions of the Data Protection Board? Firstly, it will see to it, it will monitor that all the companies which are existing in India, they are adhering to the provisions of the bill. If they are not, if they are breaching the provisions, then they can be subject to penalty. And what are the penalties? The penalties, they may stretch to rupees 200 crores for if any breach is happening related to children, that if they are not looking into the provisions related to children, then they are maybe subject to 200 crore. Or if there is any lack of security safeguard, which can be proven that the company has been lax in implementing these security safeguards, then it will have to pay a sum of rupees 250 crores, up to rupees 250 crores. So these penalty provision is also there. Apart from this monitoring and imposing the penalty, Data Protection Board is also entrusted with directing the data fiduciary. See, in case of any breach happens, the DPB, that is Data Protection Board, it will direct that data fiduciary that these are the next steps you should be taking now. Since data has been breached, you should inform us and you should inform the data principal so that we can see to it that the data breach, the effect of that, the implication is minimal. Next, any grievances related to any personal data, they will be heard by the Data Protection Board. So that is the function of Data Protection Board. The members of Data Protection Board, they will be appointed for a term of 2 years and they will be eligible for reappointment. However, how many members would be there, the number of members, what will be the selection process, that will be determined by the center, that is the central government. So that is another criticism, that the center would be determining the number of members as well as the selection procedure of these people, and they will be, the members, they will be eligible for reappointment. Now, any data which is being used or collected by a company can also be transferred outside India. That provision has now been given. Earlier it was a point of contention, that storage of data outside India. Now it is allowed. However, the government may issue a notification saying that some countries would not be allowed to store Indian data. So the government can say to it that some countries by notification cannot be used to store data of Indian people. So these are the major features. Now let us see what are the issues or the problems with this bill. See, firstly, the blanket exemptions being provided to the government by themselves for provisions like security, for provisions like public order, these are problematic. See, government in a democracy has limited rights to access the personal or private data. Otherwise, they are breaching the right to privacy of any individual, which has been held sacrosanct in the case of Puttaswamy versus the Puttaswamy case also by the Supreme Court of India. So therefore, if you are providing blanket exemptions to yourself, then that is breaching the right to privacy. Similarly, for the board members, there is the provision for 2 years only. Similarly, they are eligible for reappointment. And also the government will determine that what will be their selection process and how many members. So this is actually, then how are we expecting the board to be independent? See, let's say I as an individual, I put up a case against the government of India in the Data Protection Board. Now in that case, can you expect that the members of the board, they will be going against the government? They know that they won't be reappointed if they are giving their decisions against the government. So they will not be definitely be unbiased in my case. So that is another problem. Then again, earlier we were expecting that the provisions for data portability and right to be forgotten would be there. Data portability means that my data, let's say I am having a data on Amazon. So my data, if I want, Amazon would be providing my data to me in a machine readable format so that I can take my data and go to another website like Flipkart and then I can import that data on Flipkart. But this provision is not there. Then right to be forgotten. I was expecting that right to be forgotten would be there, that if I want, I can ask any company to erase my complete data. But this is also not there. Similarly, another problem is age of child. See, the bill provides that a child means a person 18 years, less than 18 years of age. But majorly we have seen that many countries, they are providing 16 years, 14 years and as low as 13 years because they know that the students also, they require access to Wikipedia and other such data is there. They even little children also are accessing the data. Even people, the children, the kids, they are making videos. They are on streaming platforms like TikTok or Reels on Instagram or YouTube Shorts. So when the children, they are gaining access to all these services, how are you expecting to see to it that the age of child is verified? Are you going to access for every account which is created, will you require a government ID? So that is something, verifying the age, that is a provision which will be very difficult to implement. So these are the major provisions and this is the major criticism of the bill. If you like this article, please like, share and subscribe. Thank you.